President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan delivered one of his most pointed and emotionally charged messages in recent months, speaking with a tone that combined political urgency, moral conviction, and a deep sense of responsibility toward communities suffering across different parts of the world. His words in Istanbul resonated far beyond the hall in which he spoke, carrying with them Türkiye's evolving identity as a nation determined to stand with people facing injustice, conflict, and displacement. At the heart of his address was the Palestinian struggle, but the vision he outlined extended well beyond a single geographic conflict. He portrayed Türkiye as a country that will continue to speak firmly in the face of oppression, regardless of where it occurs. In the opening of his remarks, Erdogan built the emotional and ideological foundation for everything that followed. He spoke of the enduring conflict between injustice and truth, framing the global situation in terms of moral clarity rather than mere geopolitical complexity. He said, as long as there is oppression, repression and discrimination, there will be those who resist. The darkness of injustice cannot drown out the light of truth. From the outset, he made it clear that resistance to injustice is not just a political stance, but, in his view, a human obligation. His words carried a sense of inevitability that the human spirit naturally rises to confront cruelty and repression. He emphasized that no matter how powerful the forces of injustice may appear in a given moment, they cannot permanently silence what is right. Truth will eventually find a way. We will defend justice against oppression, he said, making sure that his audience understood that Türkiye's role, as he sees it, is not passive or symbolic, but active and uncompromising. The cadence of his voice and the weight of his phrasing suggested that he intends this commitment to be seen as a cornerstone of Turkish identity on the global stage. From this broad moral vision, he moved toward the specific crises shaping the world today. His message was clear: solidarity is not selective. He described the suffering unfolding in multiple regions and insisted that Turkey cannot limit its empathy or concern to any single nation or religious group. Yet, even as he spoke of several conflict zones, he returned repeatedly to the Palestinian cause, underscoring its symbolic and emotional significance for millions across the world. He said, "I send my messages of solidarity from here to our friends in Sudan, Yemen, Somalia and many other places who are going through difficult times, especially our Palestinian brothers, struggling to heal their wounds." The decision to name Sudan, Yemen and Somalia countries grappling with civil war, famine and dire humanitarian emergencies situated Turkey's worldview within a global context. But by adding especially our Palestinian brothers, Erdogan signalled that the Palestinian issue sits at the forefront of his moral and political priorities. His language around healing their wounds evoked not just immediate suffering, but long-term trauma, displacement and the cyclical nature of conflict in the region. It was his way of saying that Turkey views Palestinian suffering not only as a geopolitical matter, but as a deeply human crisis that requires global attention. From there, Erdogan's message broadened into a critique of global governance and international institutions. In recent statements marking United Nations Day, he argued that the UN Security Council in particular has failed to uphold its responsibilities in the context of the Gaza crisis. He referred to the immense human toll and the inability of global powers to take decisive action. These points continued the theme he pressed during his Istanbul remarks that existing systems are not equipped to confront the scale of injustice unfolding in today's world. In his view, the international system is constrained by political interests, structural limitations and selective enforcement problems that he believes Turkey must help address through outspoken leadership. He then reminded his audience that this was not a sudden or opportunistic position. He described Turkey's long-standing commitment to speaking for the oppressed, suggesting that throughout more than 2 decades of significant political leadership, his government has consistently stood with those facing marginalization or violence. Whether in the Middle East, Africa, or even beyond, he argued that Turkey has made decisions based on principle rather than convenience. The subtext was clear. Even when such positions carry diplomatic cost, Ankara sees moral leadership as part of its national mission. Erdogan's tone throughout the speech was firm yet empathetic, mixing political analysis with emotional appeal. He framed solidarity not as a political tool, but as a human duty, a value that transcends borders, institutions, and alliances. His choice of language often shifted between the strategic and the intimate. When referring to Palestinians as brothers, he invoked kinship, shared heritage, and historical responsibility. When discussing Sudan, Yemen, and Somalia, he emphasized humanitarian compassion over political calculation. As the speech progressed, it became evident that Erdogan's narrative was as much about Türkiye's place in the world as it was about the suffering of other nations. He presented Türkiye as a rising moral actor, one that acknowledges global shifts and recognizes the limitations of long-standing international systems. In doing so, he positioned his country as a bridge between regions, cultures, and political blocs. This narrative serves domestic purposes as well, reinforcing the sense that Türkiye is not merely reacting to world events, but helping shape them. For audiences in Türkiye, his remarks carry political and emotional resonance. They reinforce a national story in which Türkiye stands courageously for justice, particularly for Muslim-majority communities facing violence or disenfranchisement. For international observers, however, the speech carries broader implications. It signals Türkiye's intention to remain highly vocal on the Palestinian crisis at a time when global attention can be inconsistent. It also suggests that Ankara will continue pressing for UN reform and challenging the way global powers shape humanitarian responses. Yet Erdogan's narrative is not without challenges. Critics might ask whether rhetoric always aligns with policy or whether Türkiye's diplomatic moves will be able to shift realities on the ground in places like Gaza or Yemen. Nonetheless, the power of his remarks lies in their clarity of emotion and principle. Whether one agrees or disagrees with his political approach, the commitment he articulated is impossible to dismiss. By the time his speech came to a close, the combined effect of his words painted a picture of a world in moral crisis and a Türkiye determined to stand on the side of those who suffer most. The message was not one of despair, but of determination. He portrayed injustice as a force that may appear overwhelming, but is ultimately unsustainable in the face of truth and human resolve. And at the core of this vision, he returned again and again to the idea that solidarity is not optional. It is, in his words, an imperative that defines Türkiye's place in the world and its duty to humanity. Erdogan's address was, at its heart, a reminder that for Türkiye, the Palestinian struggle remains a defining symbol of global injustice, one that demands not only sympathy, but active engagement. Whether through humanitarian aid, diplomatic pressure or international advocacy, he made clear that Türkiye intends to remain a strong and vocal supporter of those whose voices are too often drowned out by conflict, displacement and political indifference.